Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Today we have a very special style, which is an open link coffee where we just talk and bring each other ideas and then build upon them and come up with something tangible that we can bring to our groups. And kindly Lynda and Roy are facilitating today's conversation, so I will step up and please take it away. And thank you so much again to volunteer.
Great. Thank you very much, Eunice. So today's discussion, we're gonna be focused on virtual meetups versus in-person meetups. All of us had a bit of an experience before COVID hit us and changed the way that we communicated with our groups. Usually in the past, we had the online discussions in the success community or in Facebook or LinkedIn, etc. But most of our groups had an in-person meetings, and at least once a quarter based on the success community guidelines. I hope everyone actually follow these guidelines, because it helps to keep the community together. And since COVID started, we had to change. We moved from in-person meetings that you meet face-to-face into a different different way of communication with virtual meetups. And this change has both pros and cons. And this is what we would like to discuss about: what should we, now in the new normal that we're heading towards, what should we keep from this time? What should we bring back from the in-person time and combine them both? And the goal of this session basically is to have some kind of a clear understanding of where we want to aim and how we envision our community's meetings in order to have a good collaboration within the group and globally. And so that's our goal basically today, just to get to a better understanding what we should keep, what we should discard, and how to build and how to move forward and to build a better community. Lynda?
Yeah, so to that, we had started a mural board. Inez, I don't know if you still have the link and can share it, because I've got it up on the other machine, so she's gonna look at it.
Just take a moment's silence just to add. So these are for the Trailblazer community groups. So these are for the regular events and also Salesforce Saturdays for anyone who's watching the recordings earlier. So these aren't, this conversation, just to make sure we focus, because otherwise it's too wide, isn't about the one-off conferences, because those are effectively one-off big events per year, and that's a different category and a different type of event. I mean, there are some overlaps, but that's not what we're looking at today. It's more about the regular events. I shall shut up. Thank you. Sorry, Lynda.
No, that's a good comment. Thank you, Paul. It's a good comment because, again, as you mentioned, the once a year events have a different atmosphere, a different kind of a different agenda, while the regular user groups meeting that are held at least once a quarter are what we're going to focus today. And let's open up the Mural board.
So in the chat link, in the chat window, Ines has just posted a link, and someone will explain what a Mural board is for those who aren't familiar with it.
So this is a virtual whiteboard, and what we've set up is a couple different segments on it. And we're going to start with the segment where there's like a little laptop image is the first one. So there's post-it notes on there, and you can, you may have to zoom in. I find I always have to zoom in a lot on Mural board. And right on there. So it's hard for me to see both, but I think I've got both. So we've got, actually here, I'll share for a moment. Paul's already got it. Cool. So you can share, Paul.
I'll let you share. I was just going to share for the benefit of the camera. So if you don't mind sharing your screen, that would be absolutely perfect. Cool. We're both thinking along the same lines.
So we're starting up here. So you've got post-it notes. You can make copies of them. I can throw a few on here. The idea is want to see like what things have been positive and what things have been negative about meeting virtually. So to get us started, you know, you can just kind of take your, and so one of the things that's been really positive is we can get speakers from anywhere. That's been awesome. I know I saw Hussam on the call, and he actually spoke at my developer group on Sockwell several months ago, and that was great because he's out in Casablanca. He's not coming to Cleveland anytime soon. At least I don't think he wants to come to Cleveland anytime soon. We're definitely in an area where it's hard to get speakers to travel to, no matter how much I entice them with tickets to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They still don't seem to want to come. So that's definitely been one of the positives of being able to meet virtually over the last year. I know Roy had mentioned when we started this discussion, one of the positives for him was not having to find meeting space.
Exactly. Yes. Another good thing about meeting virtually is that the hustle of organizing a meetup has become, I mean, it's just setting up a time and sending out a link. That's it. You don't need to set up a venue. You don't need to organize food. Giveaways are also kind of easier to do because either you can get them or you can't. It's okay. So that's great. On the downside is that I miss the in-person meetings, that to actually talk to someone, to grab them outside of the conversation. Because, for example, even now that we're doing a virtual meeting, we have just one stream of communication, meaning it can't branch to two small discussions. You have just one big branch, and I think that one of the greatest things about setting up in-person meetings is that during the breaks and stuff like that, everyone takes it into his own area and brainstorming, and the brainstorming is a bit different than in virtual than in a virtual meetup. So that's
Can you just dig a bit deeper? So two things, because I do my normal stuff, which is to say there's some people who have not joined us before, so absolutely everyone is welcome to put your ideas on the board, because it's all about that perspective, and diversity makes us think about things we haven't considered. So just feel free to dive in, as everyone's really coolly doing. But can you just dive in about that, what you were talking about, that different brainstorming space, Roy?
Yeah, now that we're discussing. Yeah, sure, great. Now that, for example, let's take our conversation now, Paul. It's even though it's a two-way conversation, I'm talking and then you're replying, and then Lynda, and it goes back and forth. It's still one main discussion. And when you meet in person, and then let's say you present a topic, and then on the break, you have a lot of small different discussions between the community members, which aren't really tied necessarily to the main subject. I mean, people think about a lot of things, and I think that, at least in my community, that it brought up a lot of new ideas for future things, for example, because like the one thing that we're discussing now, it could become a topic for the next meeting about how can we facilitate a multi-branching conversation into a virtual meeting. I mean, we could open it up to a whole new discussion and brainstorm on that solely. So just from this small conversation, we have a new topic. When we meet in person, then the number of small conversations you have are being multiplied, because there's a lot of interactions. There's not just two people talking. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. But when you have a lot of people talking, then you have a lot of ideas throwing out in the air and a lot of different topics. So it could be, you get a lot of more variety of ideas, let's say it like that. Did I make myself clear, or?
So you talk about more ideas if people are in person, because there's more conversations going on.
Exactly.
And I'm just wondering, how can you get some of the, well, this is the conversation, isn't it? Can we get some of the benefits from the virtual? Because there are some benefits, the speakers from anywhere. Can we get those?
You're moving ahead.
Okay, I'm waiting for you to. This is what happens when I don't join the prep call. I'll wait for you to.
I also see that a lot of people added a lot of different tabs. Like, if we talked about speakers from anywhere, but also somebody added attendees from anywhere, which is great, which is also a wonderful thing. I'm not sure if you know, but whenever you create a meeting in the user group platform, we have a calendar that you can see all the different meetups around the globe, and you can actually join from anywhere, and you can just join them. I'm gonna search the link. But basically, if I see a topic in Lynda's group that is talking about something that is related to that I'm really interested in, I can just join, which is great. And I see and that's also very much connected to the more people attending, because attendees can come from anywhere, and also they can attend during any time. It could be during work, it could be during after bedtime. I once logged into a meetup in the US, which I was in bed, basically. I was already ready to sleep. I was in my bed, and I just opened my my phone. I heard it was they talked about a great conversation. They had a great conversation, great brainstorming. And even though I was half a globe away, I could attend it. I could learn from it, and then also implement that, which is awesome. There's a lot of different topics that I see that people are posting.
Yeah, and definitely on the positives, I'm seeing stuff about being able to expand network, finding, more people globally, even less cost, not having to commute. So we're helping the planet a little bit, decreasing those carbon emissions. Being able to attend events in multiple languages. So if you are multilingual, getting that practice that you don't always get. Can't say I'm there, but not needing to really take time out of the office because you're already in the space. But then on the negative side, we're hearing lots more about Zoom fatigue lately. It's harder to have those smaller side conversations. People don't hang out. So I don't know about anyone else, but in my community, especially when I have Salesforce Saturdays, it's hard to get people to leave when we're done. They want to just keep talking. I can't tell you how many times I've been trapped in a parking lot afterwards for a while, and my husband's already calling saying, "When are you coming home? We want to have lunch soon." But people are off rather quickly. Sometimes I kind of like that because with my co-leaders, it gives us a quick second to kind of recap before we say goodbye. But a lot of the attendees aren't local, so things that you want to know about your local community, about how people are faring, what the job market is, you're not going to cover that as much as you would in a closer community. For the Salesforce Saturday, I'm finding you have to be more planned. Our Salesforce Saturdays have always been kind of an ad hoc. We just show up at a coffee shop, people come in, they work on whatever they're working on, ask questions, and we're finding with being online, we have to be a little more planned about a topic for that. So definitely some differences, but these are all, this is a good list, at least for a start. Now we're going to switch some gears. So, but feel free to still add more on this board. I'm going to move my screen as best I can here to the bottom board below. Right below you see in person. And I know it's harder to think of these. It's been over a year, but think about some of the positives and negatives from when we were in person and what that was like. So You know, for me, I'd say negatives, finding speakers was always hard where I was at, you know, who want to travel to where you are. But on the positives, having those side conversations, and someone already put food and drink, definitely.
And swag.
Yes, swag. I've got, like, I went through yesterday and I'm preparing for our first in-person meeting for when we get back, and I have 2 backpacks full of swag that I've been holding.
So you actually planned ahead, which is
I
great.
didn't plan ahead. It arrived in March, like 2 days before we weren't allowed to meet anymore. So it's been sitting in my closet waiting.
Awesome. That's great for your group. Meeting in person, commute time. Networking, definitely. On the bad side, I see travel, but also I could say it's also on the good side, because the last time that I met, actually all the times that I met Ines or Paul in person were related to user group meetings. So it's so that's a good thing. I mean, I think Ines and Paul, the last time that I saw you was in Amsterdam, in Your Dreaming.
Yeah, absolutely. I love traveling. So being able to go around the globe is a fantastic excuse to also try wonderful food and drink. It's all related, you see.
And fewer technical issues. That's also true. I mean, especially when you bring in a new speaker that is not used to either, depending on the different virtual platform that you're using. But if you bring in someone new that is not used to present on Zoom or Splashat or whatever platform you're using, so you could actually be the support guy, the tech guy that just helps present, which is great. That's true. When we had in-person meetings, it was really easy technically, and getting to see new places. Yeah, that's related to the traveling we just see. As Ines, by the way, mentioned in the chat, if anyone wants to join the conversation and not just try it on the board, feel free to do that.
It's interesting that hi guys, I'm Doug, by the way.
Hey, Doug.
Yeah, it's interesting that you guys are like talking about returning to in-person and whatnot. And my only experience with meetings is all virtual. Coming from a small town in Athens, it's a commitment to have to carve out time, travel an hour and a half to Athens to Atlanta to join a meeting. And so you guys are making me nervous going back to in-person, where this is my only world right here with Salesforce.
Yeah, but
So I think we've got you covered when we start talking more. So
I think there is something special about being able to meet in person. I mean, it's been awesome that we've been able to carry on having our user groups during lockdown. And actually, it's for I co-lead the UK nonprofit group based in London. I don't actually live in London. I'm 3.5 hours away by train. So although obviously I go and I'm there physically, it is a hassle. Whereas, you know, I have to, that's like, it's like 2 days out of my working week, because I can't do it. 7 hours travel in a day by train, I can't do in a day anymore. Luckily, my company has an office in London, so I tend to blend it with a visit there, so it's not so bad. So meeting via Zoom, which is the tool we've been using, has worked really, really well. And for the last one we had, in March, which was our first meetup of the year, we actually created some breakout rooms for the first time, and that worked really, really well. And we're going to do that again this time, our next meetup in June. But I think, Doug, you'll find there's just something special about being with people. So the travel is worth it, definitely. It's like when you go to any of the big events. I mean, for me, the World Tour in London is always one of my highlights of the year, because I don't go to Dreamforce. So yeah, there's a buzz.
I also get more space to do jokes. I think virtually, it feels I really need to find the time, the right spot. So you guys missing most of them, sorry.
But we're going to come, Lynda, we're going to come on to some of the ways to manage the splits, judging from your intermission, because if you're living in smaller, more rural communities, or just ones which don't have a user group yet, then I can imagine how you're missing out. I certainly know that Melissa Hill-Dees has got a very successful non-profit group, which has only become about because of the pandemic, because no one would go to the Dakota group. There isn't enough critical mass there. But out of her group came the whole non-profit dreaming event. So maybe it's the smaller towns kind of almost clubbing together for that virtual experience. So that I wonder if the market will organically manage that, but I'm probably jumping ahead again. But that's my hope.
Actually, if I'm going to take what you just said, basically what you're kind of suggesting that there is no real need for a geolocation group to be if you're in a virtual if you're in the virtual space, because let's say that Doug is 3 hours away from, I don't know, a Boston user group, just throwing it out there. So actually there's no need to create a local user group because he's part of the Boston user group. Is that what you're kind of implementing?
Well, that's kind of what I am, but although there's still the geographic and there's definitely a time zone thing. So it aligns sort of by time zone, but we've discovered that, as you were saying earlier, you can be listening to a user group in the evening in your pajamas, when there'll be no way that you'd actually be going to that user group in your pajamas. But there are definitely geographic and cultural issues at play why some user groups might be more suitable than others. The fact that I've joined the Newcastle user group is probably something about my English character, and that I get on well with the Northerners, and and it's the size of group that also suits me. It's not a large group, and that's actually where I feel more comfortable, because there's a few people and I've got to know them reasonably well over the last few months. So that's a huge difference for me. What's Doug thinking?
I mean, the virtual experience definitely like exponentially increased my understanding of Salesforce and the community. You know, prior to everything being virtual, trying to find people in my locale was very hard. And then it's interesting because Atlanta is only an hour and a half away from me, but that's the least attendance I've had in the virtual space compared to other community groups. So I think there's a need to have a satellite community group so that in case you do want to meet in person or get to know, especially with me being new to the ecosystem, getting to know and understand the Salesforce presence in the small community is important, and having that small community group is important, yet, you know, be able to learn the bigger things in a larger user group. I hope I made sense.
It's almost, I'm going to put the words out, even though I'm not a community group leader, which is all the irony. It's almost like there's an obligation on the community as a whole that we don't lose some of this perhaps?
I'd say definitely we don't want to lose some of it. I think there's a lot that's happened with being virtual that's let us kind of expand, definitely helped all of us build more skills during this time, both for, especially from each other. I think I learned more I can tell you, I guarantee you, I learned more from attending user group meetings virtually or in person than I do from going to Dreamforce, even though I spend my Dreamforce chasing down product managers to get answers to questions I have. And even the opportunity to do that, it's not cheap for me to go from Cleveland to San Francisco. And my employers often are like, yeah, we're not sending you to Dreamforce this year. Great. So those smaller events and the community groups are often all I've got to attend to learn from. So it really becomes important. And I know that's the case for a lot of people. There aren't companies willing, hotels jack up their prices during Dreamforce. So a hotel that might have been $200 a night is suddenly $600 or more during Dreamforce. And the flights, depending on where you're coming from, have never been cheap and quick. And, for us, it's always a red eye to get to San Francisco, and it's usually a very packed plane. Not my favorite situation to be in ever, let alone when, with current situations. So I think, though, we need to move on with some of our discussion and get away from what we know and start thinking about what we don't know yet. So moving around this board is never the easiest thing for me. I'm going to figure it out. Just got to figure out how to move sideways. I think my arrow keys are going to work. So as we start thinking about the future, what are some of the considerations we need to think about? And I think we've brought some up already. Definitely, we're talking about, of course, I just zoomed in a little bit somehow. When we're talking about, do we want to continue some virtual? Do we want to be more in person? How do we make that transition? But also, what is good for the community we're a part of, we have to think of. And then outside of that, what are the rules where you're at? So I know I've seen a couple groups here in the US starting to meet in person again. Some of them have had to add additional sign-up environments. So Bevy, we don't have a lot of information from Bevy if we're using Bevy for our signups. We get the person's name. We can't really see their email address. Some areas of the US are requiring that if you have an in-person type meeting, you have to be set up for contact tracing. So you have to have ways to reach that person, identify who they are, where they're potentially going to. So I know I saw one of the Boston area groups had a separate sign up that you had to fill in to attend, where you could leave more information. I know we're getting ready for our first in-person to happen this summer. The state of Ohio has relaxed their rules quite a bit, but we've, as our group leaders and having a group leader who went through COVID, we've said we're only going to do something outside to start with. Because we're not, and a lot of the places aren't open. Offices aren't open yet. My office is opening in September. I know other people have been told they're not opening this year. So finding a location has become a little harder. Outside gives us a whole lot more possibilities because there's a really nice park system here. So
meeting outside is actually something that I think pre-COVID, no one. I think most of the user groups haven't done that. I don't think that the open meeting in the forest or a park was actually even something that we thought about. So it's a change. It's an interesting change because it brings out a different activity. Lynda, when we discussed before this session, you mentioned that that when you're going to the park, you're planning on doing a bit of a different activity than what you had than when you met in person, which is
Yeah.
great.
I think one of the things that I've talked about with my co-leader is that our in-persons for this year are going to be more our networking events, less our technical things. And if you're at a park, I can't guarantee I can get Wi-Fi while I'm at the park, and don't have a surface really to project on unless I'm bringing a screen, and then you're contending with wind. And I think that's one of the things that we hadn't really thought of in the past. It was always our in-persons. We had some kind of presentation going on. We needed to make sure we had the presentation equipment available. And even when we were doing networking things, they tended to be at places to eat, more indoor. We did an event a couple years ago where we were actually at an arcade. So we were all playing video games, and had a little bit of a video game contest with all really old classic Atari style games, so we could call it classic rather than lightning. The idea this time of being able to go outside and just knowing that as a community we just need to get together and network and be able to visit and see one another in a way that we feel safe, that where we all feel comfortable, I think. And then being outside, we can totally mix that in with Salesforce. You've got that whole trailhead and kind of the national park thing that goes on with Dreamforce. We can go to a national park if we want to, or just a local park that might look a little more like the Dreamforce, the national park at Dreamforce. And I mean, I think, and one of the things we talked about for that event is even to, we're going to have a campfire and bring stuff for s'mores. So the food's going to be nice and easy.
That's awesome. I mean, that's a beautiful idea. It's just, that's a concept that we never would have thought before pre-COVID. It opens your mind to new possibilities, new events, new ways about what is the community, basically. If it's no longer, it was always around being the technical side, let's call it like that. But when you're talking about even having a user group without a technical session, without even having a presentation, that brings the community group in a bit of a different spotlight, a different way of thinking about what it is. It's true, we have the common thing that we have between us is that we work in this ecosystem, but we are actually a group of members which aren't really related to Salesforce, even though this is our common ground, which is very, very interesting. So I see that we also have a lot of comments on the consideration how to include guest speakers. That is true. We talked about having a virtual speaker. We talked about having an in-person speaker. How do we include guest speakers both virtually and in person? We talked about return of cost, venue implications. Yeah, we talked about it because again, the venue and the food and beverages and everything, they have a bit of a cost. So that's actually became easier on setting up a virtual. Using other virtual platforms, Paul introduced me to, it was Paul, even pre-COVID, that introduced me to the quiz platform. I forgot the name.
Oh, Kahoot.
Yeah, Kahoot. That you started using that years before COVID. And only when COVID started, I started using it within my user group, because this was a way to engage with the community on a large scale. I mean, you have a group and you can't actually do, like when you have the in-person meetings, show of hands, how many people, and to have the engagement. So Kahoot was one of the platforms, one of the virtual platforms that at least I know that some of the user groups started more using during COVID time, because we search for virtual platforms to do collaborations between all the community members, which is great. Mark also says that they use Slido and Mentimeter, which I'm not familiar with, but again,
it's Mentimeter is similar to Kahoot. It doesn't have the funky backing track though, in my opinion, but it's a very expensive funky backing track if you compare the cost of the platforms.
Yeah, but which is great. A lot of different tools that we haven't used in the past, and now there are kind of another set of tools that we have. We not necessarily need to use them, but these are tools that we gained because of COVID. We gained it because of COVID, because we needed a way to interaction with our community members during the virtual events. And now that brings me to the next slide within our Mural board, which is about our forward-looking. How do we envision the future? How, given the considerations that we discussed about what's the good things and the bad things of the virtual meetings, we talked about what's the good things and the bad things of the in-persons, we talked about the considerations. Now let's talk about how we as community leaders envision the future. I
mean, I think one of the clear things you need to think about is what, and I think this was brought up on the slide a little bit, is what does your community want? You know, what's going to work for them. Each community is different. Each group is different. So either using a survey or just asking at one of your virtual meetings, you know, do you yet feel comfortable meeting in person? Do you want to meet in person, or do you want to go on virtual? Or do you want some mix? And I think one of the things we found for our group is it's been harder to have as many meetings virtually, just because we're all scheduled with lots. A lot of us have taken on a lot more work with the fact that we're home, that we're available all the time, and people realize that now. I think we kind of got away a little bit with it. Even though we were, you know, working in IT, you're still kind of on call all the time, but not everyone you work with realizes it all the time when they're also not in that situation. And they realized it and they took advantage of it during this time. So I know I've been busier, my co-leader's been busier, and we've had trouble finding the time to really put together our meetings as often as we did. So pre-COVID, we made sure we had a meeting in person every month. We're talking, you know, last year, I think we ended up with 9 meetings altogether, and I think we're probably on track to do about the same this year. But finding that mix that works for your group, you know, we said we want to try to get at least 2 in person for this year, but more on the social side and networking, and no pressure. So, you know, it's not going to hurt anyone if they don't come. And if they're able to come, it's going to be great to see them. We miss everybody. And we miss that interaction we've had. There are definitely people who have not been coming to our, you know, local people that we know used to be very involved in the group, who just felt like they didn't want to do virtual. But at the same time, we've had a bunch of new people step up who in the past weren't able to come because they couldn't get away. They couldn't find the time away. I know we have a number of young parents in our group, and it's easier for them to be home where they can still see their kids while they're meeting.
So, Lynda, how do you see your user group working in this, let's say, in the next year?
So we're like I said, we're planning on having more of our going forward for at least, I'd say a little more than 6 months, our networking things being in person. You know, the more ad hoc, less planned, we don't necessarily need all the technology tools in front of us. And then really, we've kind of come up with a list of topics we want to cover based on comments we've had from people attending our events, from new developments we've seen in the local community between job posts and what they're asking for, as well as different, you know, all the little world tours we're having every month from Salesforce, where they like to announce new parts and products, and even the ones that were announced last year that we haven't seen much on. You know, I don't know about you, I haven't heard anything about DevOps Center since Dreamforce, or that new admin center. Kind of curious about where those are going. even the rename what had been Evergreen, Salesforce Evergreen, like little parts where you could bring in Python and other languages. Haven't heard a lot about that either, but you know, we're even, one of the other things we've talked about doing is even coordinating with some of the other local user groups that aren't Salesforce that we haven't done in the past. I think more of our users are seeing benefit to that. You know, there's a local DevOps group, and a lot of our companies are looking at DevOps. And for a lot of us in the Salesforce ecosystem who have been working with change sets and maybe have experimented a little bit with the CLI, that's can be daunting. And yes, there's clear vendors in that area. There's Capado, there's GearSet, but I try to avoid bringing in vendor presentations when I can, you know, not to say vendors aren't great and can't do presentations that aren't sales pitches, but I want to have more background when I go into something like that. So we're talking about reaching out to the local DevOps group that meets and say, hey, do you have someone who could give us a really good background, or can we join you and do a co-hosted meeting on kind of the DevOps topic? And then also the local JavaScript developers group, since Lightning Web Components, and my co-leader attends those meetings because that's his background. And so he's even talking to them about presenting something on LWC for them as well. So really
in these joined meetings, do you envision them in person or virtual? Or
I
both?
think for now, those are going to be virtual. I know a lot of those groups, and a number of those groups actually already met virtually, because the Cleveland's kind of a bigger area. It's not a huge city like Chicago, but it's definitely there's like an east side of Cleveland and a west side of Cleveland, and people don't often cross the river, no matter how much you encourage them to do. And even, I'd say there's even kind of a south end of the Cleveland area that has now, the Akron area is kind of not very far, but it's not real close, and they've even got some of their own groups, but that's been more admin user and women in tech, not as much developers. So we're still getting a lot of Akron people to our group, and it's a haul for people. I think we've said the other end is just speakers. You know, I want to keep bringing in speakers from outside, getting people to talk on topics. No one wants to hear me talk all the time. And I don't know everything. I try to know a lot, but yeah, I just don't know everything. So being able to bring those speakers in virtually is pretty much our best bet. Our next event is, we actually have two planned for June, obviously the watch party that everyone is looking forward to for TDX, but I've got Mark Adcock joining us to talk about VS Code. Just had to rein him in a little bit to keep it kind of general. So we're doing it as like an intro VS Code session rather than an advanced one. And I think we'll grow to that. I think, you know, eventually doing more advanced topics, but I definitely want stuff that lets the beginners feel comfortable and still get something for those people who are ready for advanced.
So
that's always been harder in person to get that mix for people.
So if I'm trying from your perspective, you're going to do a hybrid user group meetings, meaning you're going to keep the virtual meetings and also combine them with collaboration with other technology groups, I would call them, within your area, which is great. And you're also bringing in back the in-person meetings, but to connect that to our previous conversation, in a slightly different way to have the in-person meetings, but to have them in the open ground, or at least for now. So you're gonna, and then sometime in the future, you're gonna bring in, you're gonna go back to the in-person meetings as well, meaning you're gonna, instead of in the past where you had just the in-person meetings, in the future, you're gonna have 3 types of user group meetings, which is the virtual ones, the social gathering ones, and the in-person technical social gathering combination.
Yeah, I think that, and I think one of the things we've said though is that the in-person more technical things will definitely be more, how do I put it, I think we've talked about like more hands-on stuff for those in-person technical, as well as more local focused. So
because
I know
that's the benefit of meeting in person, that when you have a
Right.
hands-on and somebody can actually go to your computer and
Mhm.
help you with this line of code, or because it's sometimes a very minor thing that somebody can just sitting next to you could help you.
Right. I mean, I love Sean's presentation and how they're doing kind of hands-on virtually and utilizing Quip. I'd love to do that. Our first virtual was a hands-on because we had a in-person planned and we just pivoted. But it's not as easy to do it in person. I mean, online for hands-on, because not everyone can share their screen at once, and you have to be patient. I facilitate Girls Who Code as a side project, and those girls need a lot of hand-holding. And luckily our groups are small. I usually never have more than 5 girls at a time. So them being able to go through and share their screen, and we work as a group, all trying to solve the problem of what's wrong with this person's little bit of Python code, or their Scratch isn't running right, what's missing. And that's great for that community, but I can see, a group of users who are developers normally are going to be like, another person sharing their screen for the same thing. Let's move on already.
Great.
And I think breakout rooms help with that, but I'm not always that comfortable with breakout rooms. When you've only got 2 facilitators and you want to have more than two rooms, it's a little tougher.
My group is a bit bigger. Usually we have between 60 and 100 attendees, and then having a breakout session having breakout rooms doesn't really help with hands-on sessions. So I totally get it. Some comment that was made on the board into the future is that ask the people what they want to do, which is great. I mean, again, we are a community. Even though we are leading the community, it's not like it's our company. So having a collaboration and asking the people what they want to do is another way to validate and to basically, I see myself as a facilitator. I facilitate the community effort. I help that, but yes, to bring in what people need, and so asking what they want, which is great. Well-being goes first, definitely, always. In person on. Sorry, yes, Ines.
I was just thinking, as we come close to the top of the hour, how does it sound if we just do a round? So everybody says one thing that really, caught their attention, something tangible that they're gonna take back to their groups, and then nominate somebody else to do the same. Does sound good?
Lynda.
Thanks. Make me kick off. Gosh, I want to find a way to. I got to use Kahoot with my group. I haven't done that. I've done that with my kids, but I haven't done that with my user groups. I'd love to see more people share their Kahoots, though, make them public so that we can steal them. So I don't have to create new ones. But yeah, just continue coordinating, definitely asking my members what they want to do. I think I'm going to do more of a online survey. We'll see if we can get them to do it. I'm also really looking forward to getting rid of the swag that is piled up in my closet so we get new stuff. But passing on, Doug's nodding, so I'm going to let him talk next.
Oh, all right. Thanks. Yeah, I love your concept of doing the hybrid where it's going to be more hands-on and more local atmosphere in person, and then a little bit broader on the virtual. That's definitely interesting and excited for that. Mark?
Yeah, so for me, I'm probably going to have to semi-cheat and take the same thing as what Doug's just said, because that was, for me, the big one, just in terms of thinking through how we kind of mix and match kind of what type of sessions we do and when. For us, our biggest kind of grouping of people at the moment aren't actually local, at the moment. We've got smaller numbers from the local area. So when you go back to, if we went to purely in person, we would potentially lose all of those really great connections we've built from around the world coming to the events. So it's kind of like, how do we do a bit of both to include stuff for local people, because there is a real benefit to actually meeting somebody, in the Northeast up here. There was always a big tradition, like kind of like shaking people's hands. I put that on Wonderboard, and you can't do that over Zoom. So having that kind of like in-person interaction, but also mix and match, and that's my big kind of thing to take to our groups. And I'll pass on to Andre.
Hi. So one of the things I saw on the board, I also put the yes up there, is asking your members actually what they would like, because we're sort of more leaning towards just doing everything in person when, of course, when there's no more restrictions, limitations, or anything, or risks. But that's definitely a good one. Yeah, we're facilitators. We're not actually. Yeah, we're just facilitating the community. So that's my main takeaway. Let's see, Tracy.
Yeah, I think for us as a non-profit group, I think we may have to face the reality that our members don't want to meet face-to-face, having really enjoyed meeting virtually. And the fact that we have lost members because they've lost their jobs because of the nature of the industries they're working in. But as everyone's saying, we will ask them what they want to do. We're very lucky in that Salesforce hosts us in London in the tower, so we don't have the cost implication for the meetings. But yeah, I think it may be a little while before we do an in-person meeting again. And I'm going to have to jump now because I have another call I've got to go to. So great to see everybody today and great to talk to you. Take care. See you soon. And I'll pass on to Leanne.
Thank you. I think it will be the asking people what they want, because I think we know, but obviously just actually putting it out there and getting that feedback will be really important. One of the things which we did even pre-COVID was we, Norwich and Cambridge user groups started looking at working together. A number of different reasons, really. So that's actually been a huge benefit to us. Me and Charlotte have teamed up and run the last couple together as joint groups. When we're in person, our attendees come from sort of in Suffolk as well, so it will be an hour and a half to go to either group, so it just seemed like the right thing to do. And we are only small groups as well, so that was nice. I think we'll continue that and do a mix of the in-person, like Lynda said, the in-person sort of networking, having a chat, because that's huge for our group. Our group, when we first got back together again, they were like, oh my God, it's so good to see you guys, and all just have a chat. And then the other great thing was we had a speaker last time, which was just amazing. And we'd never have done that online. So I think that's a really nice model to try, going forward. And then who knows, it could be something that sticks, or we'll just adapt. Who hasn't gone?
I was going to say, I think that's everyone apart from Ines. Maybe Ines did go, I can't remember.
Hey, thanks for playing, guys. I think it's a really nice way to round, for me, many things, but not to repeat. One, the calendar that Roy just showed us, where you can see everybody's events. I did not know that, so that's a handy one to have. And then second, like sessions like this of co-creating stuff, even with the members, I think works really nice. It's how we enrich each other's ideas. So, yeah, and Paul, you haven't gone either.
I don't run a user group, so that's absolutely fine. But for me, one of the big things was, I think initially, certainly at first, is for the in-person meetings, everything that we've been missing out on And perhaps the focus is, you know, about that socializing, because people's missed out on that. That's where we really need topping up on those human connections, and perhaps it'll change over time. It will then reset. But the first thing, we all know there's content online for in-person meetings. For me, it's about meeting and socializing. I think that's where I'll be keenest, because if it's presentation, actually, fuck that shit, pardon my language, but I can catch that online now. At the beginning, it's just meeting people. We're bang on time for once. So I'm holding the electronic microphone. So I'm going to say a huge thank you to Lynda and to Roy for making this session happen. There is so much thinking to do about this, and I wouldn't have arrived in the same headspace. It's kind of obvious when you get there, but you have to work through that space to get there. There's definitely challenges out there as well. We will be back in 2 months, probably, I'm guessing, because that's what we're normally doing. Not too sure what the next topic is. If anyone's got ideas, they're really welcome. But thank you, everyone, for your contributions. Thank you to Ines, who's really put in the legwork to make this session happen. Anything else from Ines? Or is that it?
Thank you. Look after yourself, and I see you very soon.
It's been lovely. Thank you very much, everyone.
Ciao.
Thanks
Thank you.
all. See you
Bye.
soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.